23 years old. Sophie was sitting in a bathroom stall at work, hands shaking, heart pounding, trying to remember how to breathe. Panic attack. Her third one that week. She'd been in a meeting, just a normal Tuesday morning team meeting. Her manager had asked her a simple question about a project she was working on, and Sophie's mind had gone completely blank. Not because she didn't know the answer. She did. She'd prepared. She'd rehearsed what she'd say. But the moment everyone looked at her, waiting for her response, her throat closed up, her chest tightened. The room started spinning. She'd mumbled something incoherent, excused herself, and now she was hiding in the bathroom, convinced everyone thought she was incompetent. This had been her life for as long as she could remember. Constant anxiety, crippling self-doubt, the overwhelming feeling that she wasn't good enough and everyone was about to figure it out. She couldn't speak up in meetings, couldn't make phone calls without her hands shaking, couldn't network at events without feeling like she was going to pass out. She turned down promotions because the thought of more responsibility triggered panic attacks, avoided opportunities because she was too afraid to fail publicly. And every night, she'd lie in bed replaying every interaction from the day, analyzing every word she'd said, convinced she'd embarrassed herself. At 23, Sophie was living in a prison made of her own thoughts. But what she didn't know, sitting in that bathroom stall trying to breathe, was that 5 years later she'd be standing on a stage in front of 800 people, speaking with confidence she never thought possible, that she'd be running her own consulting business, taking risks that would have paralyzed her old self, living a life she'd only dreamed about, not because she found some magic cure for anxiety, but because she stopped trying to eliminate it and learned to build confidence despite it. This is the story of how she did it. The real story, the unglamorous, uncomfortable, brutally honest story of how someone went from panic attacks in bathroom stalls to unshakable confidence. And if you're trapped in anxiety right now, if you're convinced you'll never be confident, if you think there's something fundamentally broken about you, this might change everything. Because confidence isn't what you think it is. And anxiety doesn't have to be your prison. Sophie's anxiety started in middle school. She was a quiet kid, smart, observant, the type who noticed everything but said nothing. In 7th grade, she raised her hand to answer a question in history class. Got the answer wrong. A few kids laughed. It wasn't a big deal. Kids get answers wrong all the time. But something about that moment imprinted on Sophie's brain. The feeling of everyone looking at her. The sound of laughter. The heat rising in her face. From that day forward, she stopped raising her hand. In high school, the anxiety got worse. She'd have panic attacks before presentations. Would fake sick to avoid group projects. Ate lunch in the library because the cafeteria felt too overwhelming. Her parents didn't understand it. Just relax. Just be yourself. There's nothing to be afraid of. But Sophie was afraid. Of everything. Afraid of being judged. Of saying something stupid. Of people seeing her shake. Of failing. Of succeeding and then being expected to keep succeeding. College was supposed to be different. A fresh start. New people who didn't know her as the quiet, anxious girl. But the anxiety came with her. She'd skip classes if she knew there was group discussion. Would have full breakdowns before presentations. Avoided making friends because small talk felt impossible. By her senior year, she was seeing a therapist. Tried medication. Tried cognitive behavioral therapy. Tried meditation and breathing exercises and journaling. Some of it helped. A little. The panic attacks became less frequent. The anxiety became more manageable. But it never went away. And neither did the feeling that she was fundamentally different from confident people. That there was something wrong with her that she'd never be able to fix. After college, Sophie got a job at a marketing agency. Entry-level position. Small team. Seemed manageable. But the anxiety followed her there too. She was terrified of meetings. Of phone calls with clients. Of her manager asking her opinion. She'd work late into the night preparing for simple conversations. Would rehearse what she'd say in her head 50 times. Would still freeze when the moment came. Her coworkers had no idea. She'd gotten good at hiding it. smiling when she was dying inside, pretending to be fine when her heart was racing. But she knew, and she felt like a fraud. Like everyone else was confident and capable, and she was just pretending to be a functional adult. That Tuesday morning, when her manager asked that simple question and Sophie's mind went blank, something broke. Not dramatically, just quietly gave up. She couldn't do this anymore. Couldn't spend her entire life being terrified of normal interactions. Couldn't keep hiding in bathrooms having panic attacks. Something had to change. And sitting in that stall, trying to slow her breathing, Sophie made a decision. She was going to figure out how confident people did it. What they knew that she didn't. What made them different. Because staying this way wasn't an option anymore. Sophie started researching confidence like it was a school project. Read books. Watch TED Talks. Listen to podcasts. Looked for the secret that confident people knew and anxious people didn't. And what she found surprised her. Everyone talked about confidence like it was a feeling. Something you either had or you didn't. Personality trait. An inherent quality. But the more Sophie dug, the more she found a different pattern. Confidence wasn't a feeling. It was a skill. And like any skill, it could be built. She found a video by a psychologist named Dr. Emma Hayes. The title was Confidence Doesn't Come from Feeling Good About Yourself. Sophie almost scrolled past. It sounded wrong, counterintuitive. But she watched it anyway. Dr. Hayes explained something that completely rewired how Sophie understood confidence. People think confidence means you don't feel anxious or doubt yourself. But that's not true. Confident people feel anxious all the time. They just act anyway. Confidence isn't the absence of fear. It's the accumulation of proof that you can handle fear. Sophie paused the video. Confident people feel anxious? That couldn't be right. Confident people seem so calm, so self-assured. But Dr. Hayes continued. You don't build confidence by waiting until you feel confident. You build it by doing things that scare you and surviving them. Every time you do something despite the anxiety, you're building evidence. Evidence that you can handle discomfort. And that evidence compounds into confidence. She gave an example. Public speaking. Most people are terrified of it, including people who do it professionally. But the difference between someone who's confident speaking publicly and someone who's terrified isn't that one feels calm and the other feels anxious. It's that the confident person has spoken publicly 50 times. And survived all 50 times. So when they step on stage for the 51st time, they're still nervous. But they have proof that they can do it nervous. That's confidence. Not the absence of anxiety. The presence of proof. Sophie watched the video 3 more times. Then she pulled out a notebook and wrote one sentence. Confidence is evidence that I can do hard things. If that was true, then she didn't need to fix her anxiety. She just needed to build evidence. The question was, how? Sophie decided to run an experiment. For 90 days, she would do one thing that scared her every single day. Not huge things, just small moments where anxiety would normally stop her. And she'd track it, keep a log, build the evidence deliberately. Day 1, she spoke up in a team meeting. Heart racing, hands shaking, voice unsteady. But she did it. And the world didn't end. Nobody laughed. Nobody thought she was stupid. Her manager actually said, "Good point, Sophie." She wrote it down. Day 1. Evidence collected. Day 2. She made a phone call she'd been avoiding. To a client. About a project update. Her anxiety told her to send an email instead. Email was safe. Email didn't require her voice. But she made the call. Fumbled through it. Forgot half of what she meant to say. But the client didn't care. The conversation lasted 3 minutes. It was fine. Day 2. More evidence. Day 1. She spoke up in a team meeting. Heart racing. Hands shaking. Voice unsteady. But she did it. And the world didn't end. Nobody laughed. Nobody thought she was stupid. Her manager actually said, "Good point, Sophie." She wrote it down. Day 1. Evidence collected. Day 2. She made a phone call she'd been avoiding. To a client. About a project update. Her anxiety told her to send an email instead. Email was safe. Email didn't require her voice, but she made the call, fumbled through it, forgot half of what she meant to say. But the client didn't care. The conversation lasted 3 minutes. It was fine. Day 2. More evidence. The conversation lasted 90 seconds. It was awkward. She couldn't think of what to say after the introduction. But she did it, and survived. Day 10. She volunteered to present in a meeting. Actually raised her hand when her manager asked who wanted to walk through a project. Sophie's anxiety screamed at her. "What are you doing? You'll freeze. You'll embarrass yourself." But she did it anyway. Her voice shook. Her slides weren't perfect. She forgot a few points. But she got through it. And her manager said, "Nice work." Evidence. Proof. Slowly accumulating. The first 30 days were hell. Sophie's anxiety didn't decrease. If anything, it got worse. Because she was deliberately putting herself in situations that triggered it. But something else was happening. She was building a list. A log of things she'd done despite the anxiety. And that list became something she could look at when the doubt crept in. "I'm terrified of this phone call." Look at the list. You've made 17 phone calls in the last 30 days. You survived all of them. "I can't present in front of people." Look at the list. You've presented 4 times this month. You didn't die. The anxiety was still there. But the evidence was starting to outweigh it. By day 60, something shifted. Sophie volunteered to lead a project. Something she would have turned down 6 weeks earlier. And when her manager asked if she was sure, Sophie surprised herself. "Yes, I'm sure." Was she anxious? Absolutely. Did she doubt herself? Constantly. But she had proof now. Proof that she could do things anxious. Proof that anxiety didn't predict failure. By day 90, Sophie had a list of 90 things she'd done despite fear. And somewhere along the way, she stopped thinking of herself as the anxious girl who couldn't do things. She started thinking of herself as someone who did things anyway. That was confidence. 6 months into building evidence, Sophie got an opportunity that would have been unthinkable a year earlier. Her company was hosting a client event. They needed someone to give a 15-minute presentation about their services. Her manager asked if Sophie would do it. A year ago, Sophie would have said no immediately, would have invented an excuse, would have felt sick at the mere suggestion. But now she had 6 months of evidence. 90 days of daily fear-facing. Hundreds of moments where she'd felt anxious and acted anyway. So she said yes, then immediately wanted to take it back. Spent the next 3 weeks convinced she'd made a terrible mistake. The night before the presentation, Sophie couldn't sleep. Her anxiety was at full volume. "You're going to forget everything. You're going to freeze. Everyone will see you shaking. This is going to be humiliating." But she'd learned something in the past 6 months. Anxiety is a bad predictor. Told her she'd fail at every phone call, every meeting, every presentation, and she'd survived all of them. So she pulled out her evidence log, read through it, reminded herself of proof. The next day, Sophie walked into that room. 50 people, clients, colleagues, strangers. Her heart was pounding. Her hands were shaking. Her anxiety was screaming. But she'd done this before. Not this exact thing, but hundreds of smaller versions. She started talking. Her voice was shaky at first, but it steadied. She forgot one of her points, but recovered. She saw someone yawn. Her anxiety said, "They're bored. You're failing." But she kept going. 15 minutes later, she finished. People clapped. Her manager gave her a thumbs up. And Sophie realized something profound. She'd just done one of the most terrifying things she could imagine. And she survived. Not because the anxiety went away, because she'd built enough evidence to act despite it. That presentation became a turning point. Not because it was perfect, but because it proved something her anxiety had spent years trying to convince her wasn't true. She was capable of more than she believed. 2 years after that bathroom stall panic attack, Sophie made a decision that shocked everyone who knew her. She quit her job to start her own consulting business. Her friends thought she'd lost her mind. "You? With your anxiety? Starting a business?" Her family was worried. "Are you sure you can handle the pressure?" And honestly, Sophie wasn't sure. Starting a business meant constant uncertainty, pitching to clients, putting herself out there, risking rejection every single day. Everything her anxiety hated. But she had something now she didn't have 2 years ago. A track record, evidence, proof that she could do hard things. The first 6 months of her business were terrifying. She had to cold email potential clients. Her anxiety said, "They'll think you're annoying. They'll say no." But she had evidence that she could send scary emails. So she sent them. She had to get on sales calls. Her anxiety said, "You'll freeze. You'll seem incompetent." But she had evidence that she could do calls anxious. So she did them. She had to set her rates. Her anxiety said, "You're not worth that much. They'll laugh at you." But she had evidence that her anxiety was a bad predictor. So she set them anyway. And slowly the business grew. Not because she stopped feeling anxious. She felt anxious every single day. But because she'd learned to separate anxiety from reality. Anxiety was just a feeling. It wasn't truth. By year 2 of her business, Sophie was making more money than she had at her corporate job. Had 15 regular clients. Was actually profitable. And then she got an email that made her laugh out loud. An invitation to speak at a conference. About entrepreneurship and mental health. In front of 800 people. 5 years ago, Sophie couldn't speak in front of 12 people in a meeting without having a panic attack. Now someone was asking her to speak to 800. Her anxiety had thoughts about this. Loud thoughts. But Sophie had 5 years of evidence now. 5 years of doing things that terrified her and surviving them. So she said yes. The conference was in Denver. Sophie flew out 3 days early. Partially to prepare. Mostly because she was terrified and wanted time to spiral before the actual event. She rehearsed the speech 47 times. In her hotel room, in the shower, walking around the city. Her anxiety was at full volume. You're going to forget everything. Everyone will see you shaking. This is going to be the worst moment of your life. The morning of the speech, Sophie woke up at 5 a.m. heart racing. Stomach in knots. She pulled out her phone and opened the note she'd created 5 years ago. Her evidence log. It was pages long now. Hundreds of entries. Small things. Big things. Phone calls and presentations and client pitches and all the moments where she'd felt exactly like this and done it anyway. She read through it. Reminded herself. Anxiety is a feeling, not a prediction. That afternoon, Sophie stood backstage waiting for her name to be called. Her hands were shaking. Her heart was pounding. Her anxiety was louder than it had ever been. But she had 5 years of proof that she could do things with shaking hands and a pounding heart. They called her name. She walked onto the stage. 800 faces looking at her. For a split second, her mind went blank. Just like that meeting 5 years ago. But then she remembered something. She'd survived the blank mind before. Hundreds of times. So she took a breath. And started talking. She told her story. The bathroom stall. The panic attacks. The years of hiding. And how she'd learned that confidence wasn't the absence of anxiety. It was the willingness to act despite it. The audience was silent. She couldn't tell if it was good silence or bad silence. But she kept going. 20 minutes later, she finished. Waited for the polite applause. Instead, the room erupted. People stood up. A standing ovation. Sophie stood there, stunned. She'd just done the most terrifying thing she could imagine. In front of 800 people. And not only did she survive, she crushed it. Afterward, dozens of people came up to her, sharing their own anxiety stories, thanking her for being honest. One woman, maybe 30 years old, had tears in her eyes. "I've been turning down opportunities for years because of anxiety. But hearing you talk about building evidence, I think I'm going to try." Sophie hugged her. "You should. It works. Not because it eliminates anxiety. Because it proves anxiety doesn't have to stop you." Today, Sophie runs a 6-figure consulting business. Speaks regularly at conferences. Has built a life she never thought possible. And she still has anxiety. Not as often, not as intense, but it's still there. Before big presentations, before difficult conversations, before new challenges. Her brain still tries to convince her she can't do things. But now she has years of evidence that proves otherwise. Hundreds of moments where she felt exactly this anxious and did it anyway. Thousands of data points that say anxiety is a terrible predictor of outcomes. That's what confidence actually is. Not feeling calm, not feeling certain. Having enough proof that you can handle uncertainty, that you can do things scared. That anxiety doesn't mean you're incapable. Sophie keeps her evidence log updated. Still adds to it. Because on the days when doubt creeps in, when anxiety gets loud, when she's facing something new and terrifying, she needs the reminder. She's not the girl hiding in the bathroom anymore. She's someone who's done hard things hundreds of times. And that person can do hard things again. Here's what you need to understand about anxiety and confidence. They're not opposites. You don't eliminate one to gain the other. Confident people have anxiety. They just have more evidence that they can handle it. Sophie didn't beat anxiety by making it go away. She beat it by proving it wrong. Over and over and over. Every time she did something despite the fear. Every time she acted when anxiety said don't. She was building confidence. One piece of evidence at a time. And you can do the same thing. Not by waiting until you feel confident. You'll wait forever. By doing small things that scare you. And tracking them. Building the evidence deliberately. Start today. Right now. One small thing. Something anxiety would normally stop you from doing. Make that phone call. Send that email. Speak up in that meeting. Your anxiety will protest. It always does. But do it anyway. And write it down. Day 1. Evidence collected. Tomorrow do it again. Something small. Something scary. And track it. Because 30 days from now you'll have 30 pieces of evidence. 90 days from now you'll have 90. And that evidence will start to outweigh the anxiety. You won't feel confident. Not at first. But you'll have proof. Proof that you can do things anxious. And that proof compounds into something that looks a lot like confidence. Sophie went from panic attacks in bathroom stalls to speaking in front of hundreds. Not because she fixed her anxiety. Because she built evidence that it couldn't stop her. And 5 years of evidence became unshakable confidence. Not the kind you feel. The kind you prove. That's the path. That's the method. Build evidence. One scared action at a time. And watch confidence emerge from the proof. You don't have to feel confident to be confident. You just have to have done enough confident things. So start building your evidence log today. Do one small scary thing. Write it down. Then do it again tomorrow. And the next day. And the next. 90 days from now, you'll look at your list and realize something. You're not the anxious person who can't do things anymore. You're someone who does things anyway. Who has proof. And that person is confident. Not because they don't feel anxiety. Because they've learned it doesn't matter. Sophie proved it. You can too. Your evidence log starts today. What's going in it first? If this changed how you see confidence and anxiety, hit that like button. Subscribe for more real stories about building the life you want despite the fear. And share this with someone trapped in anxiety right now. Because someone you know is hiding in a bathroom stall. And they need to know there's a way out. See you in the next one. Stay brave.